Primary season is upon us here, and joining me today is Missouri State Representative Bryant Wolfin. Bryant, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Is it starting to heat up? I mean, I know Missouri gets stupid hot. I've been in Missouri in like July, down in the Ozarks, and it was a disaster, uncomfortable. But primary season, is that also heating up, or is it still a little too soon?
No, both on or yes on both of those. It is quite heating up. Of course, I'm right on the Mississippi where I live, so it's very humid over here. 80 degrees feels like 95. 95 degrees feels like 110. And so knocking doors gets miserable, admittedly, around here as well. But we wouldn't have it any other way. And then in regards to politically primary, yes, things are heating up. We got about 7 weeks left towards till the primary elections, and so we're doing everything we can. We see good Liberty candidates across the state, grassroots candidates, or candidates as a whole. You're really starting to see the political ads ramp up, starting to see the negativity start to come out. And this is the downside of politics that we all love and hate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're repping the gear. Were you outdoor knocking today already, or what?
I was, yeah. So I did have to cut it a little bit short to come say hi to you, which is fine. I think it's gonna be worth it. But yeah, we were out doing doors this morning.
Why do you have a primary challenger at all? Like, you've got 100% voting record on the Young Americans for Liberty scorecard. Why on earth would Bryant Wolfin get a primary challenger?
Well, yeah, on top of that, I'm also the highest constitutional voting representative, or I guess a legislator over the last 2 years as well. But, that doesn't come without having to ruffle some feathers, where I'm different. And, you could also look at kind of the track record of those who voted against our Speaker of the House and who has primaries. There was 10 of us that voted against the speaker, the current speaker, and I think 6 or 7 of those all have primaries. A couple of them are no longer in office, or one of them is no longer in office. 2 of them are not running for a re-election, whether that's their term limits or on the better things. And so then there's the rest of us that are getting primaried, with an exception of 1. And that's how the system works, I think.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate that that's what happens, but that certainly was my experience. You don't toe the line. You do something different. These people want a homogenous legislature. At least, all Republicans should do one thing, all Democrats should do their thing. But if you dare do something different, like go, you know what? Patterson's not the most conservative choice we have here for speaker. It sure be nice if we had like a real conservative for the, heading the entire chamber. But it sounds like you and 10 others and everybody running for re-election except 1 pulled a primary challenger. Is that just a big coincidence?
Oh, I'm sure it's coincidence. No, I can promise you there's no coincidence there. Now, I guess that's one thing about our process, right? Is anybody can run at any given time. And that's the beauty of our republic. I've ran against an incumbent in the past, and of course, I had the establishment squander me then. So I shouldn't be surprised that now I'm here doing what I campaigned on over the last, basically 4.5 years. Here I'm doing, and the establishment is still trying to squander me today. And that's fine. We're going to continue to fight. And I think there's a real big disconnect between Jefferson City and actual everyday Missourians. And when I'm going door to door, or when I'm going to different events and I'm talking to folks, they're tired of government. Whether it's the federal government, whether it's the state government, they're just sick of it in general. By the way, this is both parties. I knock on both parties' doors. And so I think they want to see different right now. And I'm hopeful that when we all return past our primaries and we all win our primaries, that they understand that, hey, and hopefully our coalition grows, right? Yeah. Hopefully leadership and the establishment will say, hey, Missourians they are like these guys. So we need to give them more of a voice. We need more representation that is like this. And hopefully that will, persist into many, many years down the line.
Yeah. And this stuff can happen, in Montana. What, 2 weeks ago, I think there were like 10 rhinos taken out of office. And And I find it fascinating because, I talk to legislators in the vast majority of states, and it's always interesting talking to folks like yourself, deep red state, Republican supermajority. The people of Missouri probably think, this is great. We've got this supermajority. We can kick back and relax. We don't have to do anything. And when I hear these folks or just people in general say, there's no such thing as a rhino, that doesn't exist. Like, what's your take? What's Bryant Wolfin's take? Are there rhinos in these state capitals, or is that just a big myth?
Believe it or not, it's not something that I use real often,
Yeah.
although I will admit I do believe that there are people who are not who they campaign as.
Yeah.
So, whatever you want to call that, whether that's a rhino, whether that's, a sheep in wolves or a wolf in sheep's clothing,
Mhm.
either way, it still represents the same thing that, these guys are ideology wise different than what they campaign on. And yeah, we see that all across the state. And I think that's a big problem. Missouri historically has been a pretty democratic state. I would say more conservative Democrat for sure, kind of your old dog, just real union, heavy union state, and but still fairly conservative, mostly pro-life, a lot of Christian value. But at the same time, we have a lot of more progressive things in our Constitution because of the IP process that have been voted in. You also see a lot of the policies that we pass here in the legislature to be bipartisan supported. And when I say a lot, I'm talking like 80% of what we pass is supported by the Democrats. So, how conservative a state are we being when we see these very liberal? And by the way, some of these are my friends; like they're good people. I'm not taking that away from them, but ideology-wise, they're very progressive. They're far more to the left than what I think people from my district and what most Missourians would like to see supporting legislation that's coming through the pipeline. But 80% of what your governor's signing is supported by the other party.
Yeah. So, talk to us more about that. So, yeah, whether you want to call them rhinos, undocumented Democrats, like whatever, I don't even really care. But when they campaign on one thing, we're going to cut government, we're going to reduce your taxes, we're going to expand your gun rates, we're going to protect life, like all the typical things that you hear Republicans campaign on year after year after year, and they get people excited to go out and vote for them. But then they get sworn into office. And then, especially newbies, they meet their new colleagues, their new peer group. The people that just voted for them were likely their old peer group. Now they've got this new peer group. What happens? What have you seen unfold when these good people, who I believe at the first time they ran, they actually meant these things, but then they get sworn in? Like, what unfolds? You're there.
Well, the political game happens. The fear that your legislation isn't going to move, the fear that you may not come back because you may, if leadership doesn't like you or you're rendered ineffective, as everyone so likes to call it.
Yeah.
That's what happens. And, I get it. Like, those are the pressures you see every single day. You may have the governor's office on some of these more hotly contentious bills come down to your office or try to pull you out of the chambers and talk to you about it. And,
Yeah.
if someone wants to have a seat at the table, that is more important than their principles. Now, for me, I don't subscribe to that. And, you see that. My legislation admittedly didn't go anywhere because I voted against the speaker, along with the other, 9 folks that voted against the speaker. Their legislation didn't go anywhere neither. But here's what you should, like, Missourians should be asking themselves, and I would ask my colleagues that question themselves on this as well: is what's the problem? The problem you not playing the political game, or is the problem systemic, the political game itself? And until we get people that are willing to recognize that we don't have to go there and play this game, politics isn't politics. That I hear that so often. Well, politics is politics. I completely disagree. That's the problem with our system. That's why we've continued to have the largest government in the history of man, why we spend more money than any government and we take more money than any government ever has in the history of man. Missouri's budget's running away, but yet we have so many folks, including some really close friends of mine, who are not willing to vote against it because they want to remain on budget committee. They know if you vote against budget, you're not going to be on budget committee. Well, that's a problem. Even if I wasn't in the House, I would want people who don't like the budget on budget committee. And I would still want them to vote against it. And that's why we have a bloated budget. That's why our surplus is shrinking. That's why we passed 100 pieces of legislation this year. In those 100 pieces of legislation is so many different provisions you can't even count. So really, we probably passed 250 to 350 bills. You can't tell me you're shrinking government when you're doing that much as a legislature.
Yeah, I often ask people, especially when they're first running, what's your mission? What's your like North Star, your guiding star to try to understand what's really driving people? If it's just, yeah, I want to go in and I want to kind of nibble around the edges of tax policy, or if it's much broader and long term focused. And sometimes I'll just ask them, well, look, you're going to have to ask yourself like 10 times a day, every single day, especially while you're in session, um, how much do you really care about your mission? How often are you going to say to yourself, well, I'd rather get reelected than care about my mission. I'd rather be friends with leadership than worry about my mission of reducing government. I'd rather be liked in the Capitol than I care about my mission. Would you agree? Like that, oftentimes it's like people don't actually care about their campaign promises. They care more about being liked by their new colleagues and getting reelected.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You've been in the game longer than I have, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that is a lot of it. A lot of people think if they're not liked, they won't have a seat at the table, and I think to an extent that's probably not like the most out there mindset because it kind of is. That's the political game we're talking about. So yeah, they think. Well, I can't speak for them, but my assumption is that there is a thought that hey, if I can't do anything for my people, I'm not going to come back. So I need to have mosey up with leadership, or I need to vote yes on this bill, even though it goes against my moral compass, because I don't want to tick this person who's the rules chair off. And I heard that quite often. You have different leadership positions, not just the speaker, but some of those that maybe be chair of rules that could kill your bill in an instant. Well, we don't want to vote against her bill, and because they'll kill mine. Well, that's just not the mindset to have, and that's the systemic problem that just continues down the pipeline here. And for me, like my priority is like this. This is our Missouri State Constitution. We all swear an oath to it, just like our federal Constitution. And you might as well just throw that thing in the trash because we don't follow it at all.
Yeah, I think it's so sad when I watch people just completely upend their priorities. And to me, it signals that they have now, as they walk into the beautiful Capitol building, and the Capitol in Jefferson City truly is beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
But when they walk in there, it seems like leadership is constantly trying to gaslight and like brainwash these new people to think if you want anything done, it has to come through us. That as if all of the political power in the entire state of Missouri, what is there, like 8 million people that live in Missouri?
6.2.
6.2 million. As if the 6.2 million people in Missouri don't wield far more political power than what, 100, 150 legislators inside the Capitol. And I'm always like just begging people, you got to twist around. To heck with the people inside the Capitol building. You need to focus on the people outside of the Capitol building and make sure they're informed, that there's a ton of transparency as to what's going on, because I will always trust the people over a bunch of politicians. And if the people are banging in phone calls, sending emails, writing letters to their elected representatives and senators, and those people, those elected officials, still ignore the will of the people, well, then there's a clear action that the people can take on August 4th. But to me, that's what is so gross about it, is like they try to brainwash you to think all of the political power lives in this building, or all of the political power in the House chamber lives with the speaker. And I just could not disagree more. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. So, first day of our session back in 2025, when we were actually giving nominations for the speaker, I had said that our body had become more of a monarchy than an actual republic because, our speaker is our king, where, the actual power should reside in the people. Article 1, Section 1 of our state constitution states that the government derives its power from the people.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, we really need the people, like you said, to kind of wake up right now and kind of educate themselves, because the government is what the people make it. And right now, the people don't understand what is going on there. So I kind of made that my mission to educate Missourians that you're right. Like, yes, we have this super majority of Republicans. And, I don't think we're doing all the great Republican things that we say we're supposed to be doing.
I would still argue, like, if the people are informed, if there's utter transparency on what leadership's doing, leadership could get booted. We're watching the Senate president got booted out of North Carolina a couple months ago. I know the Senate president in Idaho, I think maybe a cycle ago, was removed. And I think there's some big stuff happening in Oklahoma. I think their primary is actually tomorrow, Tuesday the 16th. But I think it takes really being transparent with the people, what's going on with these individual legislators, especially leadership, which can take a lot of courage. And that's what's really lacking in the political environment, is this severe lack of political will. But Missouri did something interesting. And this is why I think I have this giant yellow flag over Amendment 5. So suddenly, out of the blue, this January, maybe even back in December, but I feel like starting in January, the governor was saying he wants to repeal the income tax. I know, talking to Missouri legislators, lobbyists started lobbying to, support this. I think was it a Senate joint resolution or House joint
It was
resolution?
House.
House, okay. To repeal income taxes. And the initial language was kind of crazy in my view, the triggers they had put in there. Now they've since, I think, took the triggers out, and it's going to be a ballot initiative here in November. But suddenly there's this big push to repeal the income tax. And I'm all about that. Like in Young Americans for Liberty, we're all about repealing income taxes, property taxes. But tell the people about, what is Amendment 5? Like, what's your take on this thing? Because it just smells strange to suddenly see what appears to be a whole bunch of political courage come out of nowhere.
Yes. I mean, so it's kind of funny. So I do not support it, but similar to what you had said, I absolutely do support eliminating the income tax. I campaigned on it the first time I ran. I campaigned on it the second time I ran. And, to an extent, although I have to kind of watch what I say, because we have this Amendment 5 on there claiming it's going to get rid of income tax, but I still support the principle of it. But Amendment 5 doesn't do that. It's kind of, once again, that sheep or wolf in sheep's clothing. So what this Amendment 5 does is it has a provision in there that states that the General Assembly shall work on legislation that eliminates the income tax. But what does that look like? I don't know. In the first version you alluded to, there was a trigger system in there. I actually voted for that version because of the trigger system. I didn't love it, for sure. There were some things that I had a bad taste in my mouth about, but the trigger system is better than our current trigger system. And that alone, I thought was okay, worth the vote. Well, then it goes to the Senate, and then they took the trigger system out and they replaced it with that version of "we shall work on legislation." Well, there's no time frame on that. We could come back next year and work on it right away. And, I'm hopeful that's the case, but we may not. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't say that that's the first thing we have to work on in this resolution. Do you have a question?
Yeah. All right. So there's the whole Amendment 5 thing. They're putting a ballot initiative out there to potentially say, hey, people of the Missouri, should we, as a legislature, repeal the income tax? But my question is that even necessary? You guys have like a 300-page constitution. Maybe you have to have a constitutional amendment to repeal income taxes, but do they even have to do this thing?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because no, we do not. We can eliminate the income tax right now without going to the vote of the people. There's nothing preventing us from doing that other than our political will and fiscal responsibility. With that said, there are ways to do it without going to the vote of the people. The only reason they have to go to the vote of the people is because they want to shift the tax burden in other ways that they cannot currently do without asking the people to vote for it, and people don't want to see their taxes increased. So we will more than likely, of course, we don't know because it's still vague, we will more than likely be shifting the tax burden from income tax to a consumption tax, which principally I'm actually fine with. But here's my discomfort with this is there's a net neutrality language in this bill. And it basically says, hey, if we raise revenue 100 million by increasing, maybe expanding the tax base or increasing sales taxes up to a certain percent to bring in $100 million, we have to lessen the income tax to reduce that revenue by 100 million, therefore being net neutral. And that's kind of like one of the main selling points. But in the language itself, there's really nothing that's holding. It's based off of our findings. So it's essentially, in my opinion, a guess. But what happens if we're wrong? What happens if all of a sudden we plan for 100 million, 100 million offset, but we actually start bringing in 150 million or 250 million, but yet we only decreased the income tax 100 million? Well, then we increase the tax burden on Missourians. And that's my biggest consternation with this bill, is the thing that's supposedly supposed to be the most conservative portion of it, the net neutrality. Even though I think getting rid of the income tax should be shrinking government, this argument is we're going to get rid of the income tax, but keep the government the same size. Well, I don't think that is necessarily I think it's a possibility, but I think the more likely scenario is we'll continue to grow government.
Yeah, that's what I'd imagine. And I don't quite understand, I never will, why it is. Like, I think Montana in their last session, budget session, increased spending. I've heard anywhere from 13 to 17%. So I'm sure the truth is somewhere in the middle. I would imagine the state of Missouri has increased its budget 50% since COVID. I mean, total government spending in this country has gone up 50% since 2019. And so you watch even these red states, oh, we increased spending by, 10%, 12%, 13% in Montana. And then when you come forward and say, how about we get rid of the property tax? And that's like 20% in most states, kind of their 20% of their revenue. And so you're essentially proposing a 20% reduction in spending after, year after year of 8, 10, 12, 14% increases. You say, hey, how about we just do like a 20% decrease? And everybody loses their mind and says, this is impossible. It cannot be done. You've lost your mind. Like, what's your take on that? How come, like, people have this sense, especially legislators, that the government can never shrink?
Well, once again, I think it probably leads to it may not be the most politically advantageous. We have so many Americans that are living off the government or benefit off of government services as it is right now, that it's very difficult to kind of pull those off, whether you think that's the role of government or not. I think you and I would probably are going to be on the same wavelength that obviously government does way too much. And I would like to see that peeled back. But, when we start actually making those tough decisions and, a lot of those lobbyist organizations are, that's what they're fighting for, is to keep those services in there. And once again, our priorities are all in the wrong places. I think we could cut and maintain many of the services, or a majority of most, if not all of the services that we still have. And we could save the taxpayers billions of dollars, but it's everybody has to have a little bit of the slice of their pie. And
yeah, well, I appreciate your honesty, because it is that's to me the real answer is the special interests, all of the agencies, everybody on the dole would lose their mind if somebody proposed a 20% cut, hell, a 1% cut. People lose their minds over this stuff. And to me, it's so disappointing. Like, I don't know if you've ever had this. I mean, you're a business owner. Maybe you have had it happen to you. But I remember, two occasions. One, in my corporate world, we lost our biggest customer. And I took a 30% pay cut, 30% pay cut. And my wife and I, we had to figure it out. We figured it out. We made it happen. When I owned my company, I lost my biggest customer. They were a huge chunk of my business. And I had to figure it out. I had to let some people go that were phenomenal people. And it was nothing personal. But when your biggest customer, who was probably like 40% of my business, said, yeah, we're just going to do it in house now. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to start doing the jobs of other people and I got to wear a bunch of hats. But you figure this stuff out. And I would say it's high time that government actually takes a haircut and they figure it out. Like, not my problem. Because I feel like isn't your budget as big as the state of Illinois? And that has like 13 million people in it. Isn't that what's unfolding?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, for sure. And
Same amount of
there's
money.
some nuance in there, right? So
Yeah.
like admittedly, some of the spending is different. Some of the ways that they get their funding is different. We have a lot of federal funding that comes in. So like our general revenue is considerably less than Illinois, but either way, it's still taxpayer money.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, we are drunk on government as a society. And I'm not going to sit here and say I have all the answers. There needs to be some very difficult decisions that need to be made. And unfortunately, as a society, we're going to have to figure it out.
Yep.
And so we do have to come together as a family, so to speak, and, bite our tongues and, start to talk about what post government spending looks like, because especially here in the state, as federal government money is drying up, and our surpluses are going to dry up as well. We're going to have to. Our pre-COVID spending levels were about 28 to 29 billion, and after COVID, it went up to over 50 billion. Now we are back down this year. We finally broke underneath the 50 billion marker, which was fantastic. But unfortunately, our general revenue, like on paper, it looks great. It looks like we continue to cut, but in reality, we actually are spending more GR money than we were the previous year. So that's deceiving as well. I see a lot of colleagues being like, oh, this is one of the most conservative budgets we've ever seen. And I'm like, well, we're actually spending more state money than we ever have still. So,
Yeah.
It's to each his own. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of difficult decisions to be made. I know that I'm willing to make those decisions, but, it makes me unpopular. And so we need more Missourians to understand the proper role of government as well. Read your constitutions, read your historical documents and evidence of what our founders believed in and what generations before us believed in, and understand that, we're going to have to really change the ship. Otherwise, we're headed towards that iceberg and we're going to hit it.
Yeah. And I would argue the more unpopular legislators are in a Capitol building, odds are the more popular they are with the people outside of the Capitol building. And I really hope more and more elected officials kind of wake up to that and go, you know what? I don't really care what the people in this building think of me. I watch them betray their campaign promises and their constitutional oath every single day, and turn around and face outside that Capitol building and tell the people what's going on with that transparency and fight for them, because those are the folks that matter. But I'm constantly just shocked with how many elected officials are enamored with, well, what do my colleagues think of me? Like, who cares what these people think of you? Fight for the people here. I've got this giant Braveheart painting on my left here that I hung in my office in the Capitol, and that's the first thing I would see every day walking in. And I feel like there's so many lessons that can be learned watching Braveheart. Just the ability to resist getting bought off and being liked by your lords and your leadership is such a valuable lesson. But what can the people of Missouri do? So you got about 7 weeks, you said, before this August 4th primary. I really believe that you get the government you deserve. Like, what's your guidance for folks out in Missouri between now and August 4th?
If you really want change, and it's going to come from you, it's not going to come from your politician that you're going to your Lincoln days or your Reagan days or your Trump days, and you're hearing this awesome speech. Like, I'm pretty good. I feel like I'm pretty good at giving a speech, but I'm not perfect. And I would hope people would come up to me and ask questions, specific questions, and the hard questions, and not just be like, oh, this guy's pro-life, he's pro-Second Amendment, and he's pro-religion, and he goes to church, he's got a nice family. Like, it's more than that. It's so much more than that. And we really, really need the average person to step up and understand what the proper role of government is, what our founders believed that our state and our nation and the type of government that they conceived for us and what it's supposed to be, and not just what you currently see on Facebook or things along those, or
Yeah.
in the mainstream media. So that's, if there's any lesson that I could give, and quite frankly, when I give my speeches or I'm going door to door, like that's what I'm telling people. I'm educating them how their government is not transparent, how their government is the biggest government in the history of man, how we are not fiscally responsible, even though we're majority Republicans,
Yeah.
and so on. So I know I'm one man doing it, and hopefully we can continue to get more to do that as well.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like that's what people need to do. They've got to get informed on how do these people actually vote. Like me personally, I don't watch the floor speeches. I don't go to the events where politicians get to spew their talking points. I listen to politicians in really three ways, and I encourage everybody else to do it too. Um, Look at the bills they've authored. Do you like their bills that they've authored? Do you not? Are they constitutional? Are they not? Then I look at how did they vote, and that is like so critical. Are they actually voting your values? So check out the actual voting records. I think you mentioned a Lock and Smith is a decent scorecard for Missouri. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say Lock and Smith is the most objective organization that I've seen, because they don't care about policy. They only care whether or not you follow the state and federal constitution, which is why I love them. But every organization has their own agenda and scorecards. So they're picking and choosing which legislation that gets scored, and whether that's convenient for them or whether it usually is whether it's convenient for the legislators that they like, and typically how that goes. So you have to be mindful of that as well. Obviously you see a lot of scorecards getting slapped around campaign season. I've not necessarily ever been on board with those, and I've always kind of seen right through it. So, it is one way of seeing generally how a candidate could be. But you have to realize that, like candidates like myself or like Senator Moon typically don't score well even on conservative scorecards, because we vote Constitution first. And to give an example, if a conservative organization out there sees that this conservative principle is on this bill, but this bill is a multi-subject Christmas tree bill, they may score it as a positive, but I'm going to vote against it because as regardless of the subject policy in that bill, if it's multi-subjected, then it's violating our Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to vote against it. Senator Moon is going to vote against it, and therefore it's going to lower our score. So yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, because I do think that is something that people need to realize as well, is not everything is black and white.
Yes.
If you vote against a piece of legislation, specifically someone who thinks they're, I consider myself conservative, small government guy. If I vote against something that seems like it's a no-brainer conservative policy, well, chances are if I voted against it, it's probably because it wasn't constitutional. And I think above all things, we should be following the Constitution, because if we don't follow our Constitution on something as simple as a single subject issue, or keeping the original intent of the bill intact, that's clear, transparent things. If we can't follow simple things like that, what other things are we not following in the Constitution? Yeah. I have a standard, and I think I'm the only representative that does this. I could be wrong, but I have a plaque on my office wall that says my first standard is it constitutional? For every piece of legislation, is it constitutional? My second standard, does it grow government? Mm-hmm. And my third standard is it good policy? And if it doesn't pass the sniff test on all three of those, I'm almost guaranteed to get a no every time. The only exception I would say is if I have this outpouring of constituents that reach out to me, because, we're a representative at the end of the day. We're representative first for our people. And if we have this outpouring of love or hate for this specific piece of legislation, then of course I got to be a representative as well. But when I tell people about my standard, and when I tell people how I vote and the reasons I do why I do, I have not found one person outside of the building in Jefferson City that disagrees with me.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And I guess we can wrap this up, and it's a great note to wrap it up, because look, here's Bryant Wolfin, representative out of Missouri, saying, I need to hear from you guys. If I hear from the people I represent that you love this bill or you hate this bill, then he's going to listen to you. And that means you have the power. You just need to wield that power. And we'll do classes. I suppose I should pitch this. If you're watching this, and you're going, man, I want to be more effective politically. I want politicians to listen to me. Reach out, give me a call, shoot me an email. We'll do a full 1 day school. You just need to find some people to attend. And this is the same offer goes for you too, Bryant. If you got folks that you want to train on how to be better activists. But if you're watching this, here's a quick lesson from the class, and we'll wrap this thing up because I always try to wrap these videos up with this. Huge lesson. If you are sick and tired of being politically ignored, being politically disrespected, if you want to be politically respected, you must be politically feared.